Thank you. You've got a tough job. Used to work for Mr. Graves, now you work for Mr. Trump. One guy's the show me state, the other guy's not going to show you nothing. So it's difficult. Several of the people up here have said, well, Obama approved this or Obama's people approved that. You would agree with me, that doesn't necessarily make it the gold standard or right, does it?
I think that they're simply reflecting what happened, sir. So I don't know that there is a gold standard for an outlease along these lines.
Right. So you look at what's right and what's the best thing for the country, and not necessarily Obama did it or Calvin Coolidge did it or whoever. One of the questions that's come up has been the Monaco Hotel. And as I understand it, in the response to the questions we asked of your committee, there is confidential information concerning the lease of the Monaco under the terms and conditions of the lease, and GSO was contracting the officer to see if the tenant would consent to release the information to the committee. These were in answers to our questions subsequent to the hearing in September. Do you know if the Monaco has responded to your to the contracting officer who requested to release the information to the committee?
So I apologize, sir. I don't know, but I'm happy to look into that and get back to you very quickly.
Sure. Well, that's question number 4. My questions with for that date is toward the end of the questions, and said the GSA contracting officer has requested the tenant's consent to release the information to the committee. Subject to such consent, GSA will forward the lease to the committee under separate cover. So I appreciate your letting me know if they have consented. Okay. Secondly, why is the lease, does the lease have that requirement? A lease is between you and the lessee. Why would a government agency who is responsible to the public and responsible to Congress for oversight of what you're doing in the public, for the public's good, why would you have a confidentiality clause in a lease? Why would you agree to that?
So I can't speak to why anything in 2012 was negotiated the way it was, the terms of the lease. That at least I wasn't party to that discussion.
This is apparently not just this lease. This is apparently all leases. This is referring to the Monaco, and it said it's confidential information or the terms and conditions of the lease. Why would we have confidentiality on any leases?
Because I believe that most companies who are doing business with us are very concerned that others are going to be able to get a competitive advantage by seeing their financial records. And so in order to make sure that we have companies willing to do business with us. Does
the lease have anything about their financial records? The lease, doesn't it just say what they're obligated to pay in rent? And that's public information, is it not?
So and we have disclosed that we're, the amount that we're receiving under the OPO lease at this point in time. I'm not as familiar with the Hotel Monaco lease, but my understanding is that most of our leases, these out leases, do go into when they're for larger amounts of money, or if there is any calculation that's based on gross, we're going to ask for additional financial information.
In the lease, it asks for additional financial information from the lessee?
In an out lease where there's a base rent or the rent could be based on a percentage of gross, yes, we do ask for, and I know
that's not in the lease. The request for information might be in the lease, or the requirement to disclose, but the data concerning their financial situation's not in the lease.
I'm sorry, the requirement to provide GSA with that data is in the lease. Is that what you're?
Right. This says that
I apologize.
The lease is confidential information under the terms and conditions of the lease, that the lease itself is. Please provide, the question was, please provide the committee with an unredacted copy of the Monaco lease and all accompanying amendments to the lease. And the response was, that's confidential under terms and conditions of the lease. That means that the lease cannot be revealed to the public. That's ridiculous.
And I apologize, sir. I am not familiar with this lease, and I'd be happy to get
back. If you look into it, it's a question number 4. We want to see the lease. We want to see and see why you even make that confidential. You're agreeing to something to keep the public out of it. That's not your job. You should not agree to that. And if a tenant wants to not have the lease be public, there's something wrong with the lease. That's number 1. Number 2, Have you looked at the Monaco? They pay more, they pay above the base rent, so you've audited them, or they voluntarily done it. Why have you not audited the Trump Hotel post office like the Monaco has done to pay more than the base lease?
So the decision to conduct an audit would be that of the lease contracting officer.
Excuse me?
That decision would not be a decision that I make, sir. That's a decision the contracting officer makes. And I think that if you all would be willing to come in and take a look at those financial records, I think that a lot of this information would be a lot easier to understand.
And if I could just have one last second, Madam Chairman, I would suggest, you said that you would, if it was required, that you would look into the new owners of the hotel and whether they had foreign influence, if it was required. If it's not required, let me suggest you find a way to make it required. You ought to do that if they lease this and sell this. And one other question, the Saudis apparently bought 500 rooms in the hotel. Do you have any basis to believe any of those rooms were even occupied?
I'm not familiar with the day-to-day operations of the hotel.
Well, we ought to look into it, because 57% occupancy, I'd like to know what percentage of the rooms were sold. And you could sell rooms to anybody, a foreign power, an American group, anybody. Rooms could be sold and not used, and that's a way to provide graft. And that's what the problem is here. It's a emoluments clause, but it's also to make sure they're not just cleaning money or funneling money through room reservations and not using the rooms. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Palmer?